I'm Michael Holmes in Atlanta, and this is CNN.
I'm Eleni Jakas, and the closing bell is ringing on Wall Street right now.
The January 6th hearings may be on hiatus, but the committee's work sure is not. The lead starts right now. New video from the January 6th committee featuring Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, as well as Ivanka Trump dishing on her dad's speech the day after the Capitol riots. Also ahead, not your average cell phone towers, why the FBI believes some could be equipped with Chinese spyware strategically placed across the U.S. Plus, a pastor robbed in the middle of his sermon, $1 million in jewelry stolen, and a live stream captured the crime going down. Welcome to The Lead. I am Casey Hunt, in for Jake Tapper. We start today with our politics lead and the January 6th committee releasing new evidence in its case against Donald Trump as it narrows its focus for the coming weeks. On the agenda, trying to compel testimony from Ginny Thomas, a conservative activist and wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, over her role in advocating to overturn the 2020 election. Committee Vice Chair Congresswoman Liz Cheney telling CNN they will consider a subpoena if Thomas doesn't cooperate.
We certainly hope that she will agree to come in voluntarily, but the committee is fully prepared to contemplate a subpoena if she does not.
The committee is also pushing to get more documents from the U.S. Secret Service and answers about the agency's potentially missing text messages from on and around January 6th. One of the committee members, Congresswoman Elaine Luria, released previously unseen video testimony this morning, highlighting Trump's reluctance to give a speech condemning the violence on the day after the insurrection. It shows Trump crossed out lines from his prepared remarks on January 7th, including this one, highlighted in yellow, addressed to the rioters. It said, quote, "I want to be very clear, you do not represent me." He crossed that out. CNN's Ryan Nobles starts us off from our coverage from Capitol Hill with a closer look at the new testimony released today and the witnesses close to Trump, who could be appearing in front of the committee soon.
The January 6th Select Committee is far from done.
The committee will be in order.
Planning hearings for September and promising their August will be spent expanding an already sprawling investigation.
We anticipate talking to additional members of the president's cabinet. We anticipate talking to additional members of his campaign.
All this while continuing to reveal new information they've uncovered.
Was the implication that the president was in some ways reluctant to give that speech?
Yeah.
Okay, what do you base that on?
The fact that somebody has to tell me to nudge it along.
Representative Elaine Luria sharing a video montage of interviews they've conducted to show how former President Trump cut lines from a speech he delivered the day after the Capitol riot.
And as you can see throughout the document, there are lines crossed out. There are some words added in. Do you recognize the handwriting?
It looks like my father's handwriting.
Trump cutting out criticism of the rioters, even as some of his top advisors, like White House counsel Pat Cipollone, made clear they thought the president needed to send a clear message.
In my view, he needed to express very clearly that the people who committed violent acts, went into the Capitol, did what they did, should be prosecuted and should be arrested.
The committee is also trying to determine what members of the Secret Service were up to, especially after the Homeland Security Inspector General accused the agency of deleting text messages from January 5th and 6th.
We've got new information that we're requesting and receiving as well from the Secret Service, and there's just a lot of questions still to be answered on that front. So I think that's something we're still working through, taking in this new information.
Meanwhile, the committee still wrestling with how to handle Ginny Thomas, the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, who was in touch with Trump Chief of Staff Mark Meadows and conservative lawyer John Eastman, encouraging them to continue efforts to overturn the election.
It's very important for us to speak with her, and as I said, I hope she will agree to do so voluntarily, but I'm sure we will contemplate a subpoena if she won't.
And just how long could this investigation go? Originally, it was thought that the committee would wrap up their work by Election Day and issue a final report sometime this fall. Now, committee members suggesting that their work could continue perhaps even until the end of the year, pointing out that the resolution states that their work is not done until they issue their final report. And Casey, they can issue that final report whenever they choose.
Indeed. Ryan Nobles on Capitol Hill. Thanks very much for that. And joining me now to discuss is January 6th committee member, Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren. Congresswoman Lofgren, thank you so much for being with us. I want to start with the new video that was released by the committee today. Jared Kushner said he wasn't sure why Donald Trump crossed out the lines in the speech that condemned rioters. What is your understanding as to why Trump refused to say things directed at the rioters, such as, quote, "I want to be very clear, you do not represent me"?
Well, I mean, you can see what he did. That was recommended that he say that, and he struck it out. One can reach a conclusion or believe that it didn't reflect his view. Maybe they did represent him. You know, we have so much evidence for each of these hearings that the time constraints are such we can't include everything. And that's been true not only for last week's hearing, but all of them. And so we will, in some cases, be releasing additional evidence that just because you can't have a 20-hour hearing that we think is pertinent, and that will be from all of the hearings.
Okay, so you've said, and others on the committee have said, that you're willing to subpoena Ginny Thomas, the wife of Clarence Thomas, if necessary. How long are you willing to let negotiations go on with her counsel before you issue such a subpoena?
Well, we want to give her every opportunity to come in. When we first invited her, she said publicly that she wanted to come in. She looked forward to it, and we thought she would be coming in. She now has counsel, which she, of course, has a right to do. And, you know, we're talking with her lawyer, but, you know, there's a limit to how long
Weeks, months?
that goes on. Well, I'm not going to say, you know, how long, but at some point it doesn't look serious. It looks like a delay tactic, at which point we have to see whether or not to issue a subpoena. And as others have said, and as the vice chair said, that's very much a possibility.
Do you have any concern at all about setting a precedent by subpoenaing the wife of a sitting Supreme Court justice? Does that enter into the calculation?
No, because it's not about who she's married to. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with what she did with Dr. Eastman. She's an independent actor. Both she and the justice have said that, and we take them at their word. This is about what she did, and we are in need to know more about that.
So Congresswoman Liz Cheney over the weekend said that there are interviews scheduled with former Trump cabinet officials. I'm wondering, did those officials come forward recently? Were they resisting coming before?
Well, we're not going to get into a discussion of the witnesses in advance. That's really contrary to the committee rules, and I try and stay pretty close to those requirements. But I will say that as more information comes out, it leads to a few more questions. For example, the recent information about the Secret Service has raised quite a few questions that we need to get answers to. That wasn't apparent earlier.
Right. In fact, that's actually what I wanted to follow up with you on. Adam Kinzinger, fellow member of the committee, would not rule out issuing a subpoena for personal phones of the Secret Service members who had these interactions with President Trump on January 6th. Do you believe that somebody acted maliciously when it comes to the potentially missing text messages here?
Well, I don't know, but here's the facts. I mean, on January 16th, Secret Service received a letter signed by 4 committee chairmen. This is before the J6 committee existed, telling them to preserve all the evidence. 11 days later, they erased it. So that's problematic. We did not receive all of the information we sought until, and we still haven't received it all, until the subpoena was issued, which is of concern. I'll tell you, I have a concern. It's very clear now that by the morning of January 6th, The Secret Service and the security people knew that an armed mob, was forming up to go to the Capitol, and yet they sent the vice president with a very small detail, protective detail, right over to the Capitol. How did that happen?
Do you think that was a malicious move on the part of the Secret Service? Is that the suspicion of the committee?
I'm not making allegations. I'm not making allegations. I'm asking questions. We need to find the answers to these questions.
All right. Democratic Representative Zoe Lofgren, thanks very much for your time today. We really appreciate you being here. Separately, there is also the investigation in Fulton County, Georgia, into Trump's actions. Next, why a judge shut down part of the district attorney's probe in that case today. Also ahead, the Pope's historic visit to Canada right now and his apology for what he calls deplorable evil in Catholic residential schools.
Our mission is to see this young generation of leaders growing up make change in the world. My name is Edlira Debrane, and I'm the communications officer of Finnish School of Kosovo here in Kosovo, Europe. We created a wall of freedom, which is still in our halls. We organized a bake sale where we collected over 500 euros, which are going to be donated to an organization against domestic violence. I would say the one that we are most proud of is the Set in Stone Garden. For over a month, each student gathered rocks. We took these rocks, we wrote down our vows and pledges to end modern-day slavery, and then we took all those rocks outside in the middle of our schoolyard, and we spelled out My Freedom Day. So we had this really cool shot where everybody was shouting out My Freedom Day, sort of like a symbolic way to say that our pledges are actually set in stone and they will remain there forever. This, I believe, has made a very long-lasting impact on them, and it's something that they have vowed to actually take on in the following months. You'll see them around the school still doing other things for My Freedom Day.
I want to go now to an incredible story of survival. Could all this spending lead to a bigger economic crisis? Would you do it all again in terms of being a nurse?
I want to help people more than I ever have.
Aaron Burnett out front on CNN. Connect the world with Becky Anderson.
It all starts here. Changing, fighting, creating, connecting. Real news that shapes our world. Getting perspective on this region from this region. Places that many of us know, but few of us get to see. It all starts here. And that's why we're here, bringing you the world from our Middle Eastern hub.
Connect the world with Becky Anderson, Monday through Friday on CNN.
This is a really important story. My name's Clarissa Ward. I work for CNN. Assalamu alaikum. Day in, day out, you see the reality of people living through this. Ничего страшного. Okay. This is the front line. On a human level, you find courage, sacrifice. This is what life is about. A lot of people are wondering why. You see the worst of humanity.
Putin might use a nuclear weapon.
Absolutely terrifying.
But you also see the best of humanity. My job is to be present. The human cost is right here. And to tell these stories.
We're talking about families.
That is the most important thing. I'm Clarissa Ward in Ukraine. This is CNN.
We're back with our politics lead and a major development in the Georgia investigation into Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election. A judge ruling today that the Fulton County District Attorney cannot question a Republican state senator who was one of the fake Trump electors. Let's bring in CNN's Kara Scannell. Kara, why did the judge decide to do this?
Well, Casey, in this situation, the issue here was the judge found that there was a conflict of interest that the district attorney, Fani Willis, had. The backstory is that this fake elector, he's a Georgia state senator, Burt Jones. He was also a target of the investigation, but he's also running for lieutenant governor in the state. And here's the rub. So Fani Willis, the district attorney, had a campaign fundraiser and had donated money to his rival, his political opponent, in that race. The judge saying this is an untenable conflict, saying that she cannot question him, that she cannot include him in whatever report the special grand jury produces. But he said that she can continue to ask questions about him, and any of that material can be turned over to an independent prosecutor, a different district attorney, to look into that issue. But otherwise, this investigation will continue.
I was just going to say, I mean, what does this ultimately mean for the broader investigation into Trump going forward?
Well, I mean, as of now, that it is limited only to Jones. Some of these there are 11 fake electors that also tried to get the judge to rule in their favor. He denied that. They are expected to appear before the grand jury this week. And meanwhile, today, the Georgia governor, Brian Kemp, is taping a testimony for the special grand jury that will be shown to them at some point in the future. He's not appearing live because he's the governor of the state, and the prosecution agreed to give him that kind of accommodation. But he's one of several witnesses that will be appearing, including Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani. He's been ordered to appear next month. So we're really getting, into the heart of this. And Kemp is particularly interesting because he had direct conversations with Trump. He's one of those officials that Trump reached out to. And Trump had asked him to impanel a special session of the state legislature, wanting him to try to overturn Biden's win there, also asking him to order an audit of the signatures on those absentee ballots.
So much there. All right, Kara Scannell, thank you so much for that report. We really appreciate it. Many economists insist the U.S. economy will officially hit a recession this week. But the White House says not so fast. Attempts to change minds, no matter what reality might be, next.
With Bitcoin, not only do we have the best monetary asset in human history, we have the best monetary network in human history. Bitcoin solved a lot of the monetary functions that we know as very expensive with cryptography and with math. And so I can escrow a bearer instrument in Bitcoin. It's worth the same amount in Chicago as it is in London, as it is in Nigeria, as it is in Argentina, and I can zip it around the world instantly and for free. What we can do is take your dollars and escrow them around the world over the Bitcoin network. So think about this. What if I wanted to send money from Chicago to London? What we can do is take dollars out of your bank account, turn it into Bitcoin, zip that value to London instantly and for free. You blink, you'd miss it. It goes so fast and it costs nothing. And then we turn it back into British pounds. That's the innovation, and that's how we use Bitcoin, the monetary network.
So many questions about what is the federal government doing. Do you get the anger that is out here?
How concerned are you about the front line?
You don't believe that there's a racial divide here?
Looking back, as president, did you tell the story of race in America enough, do you think? All the places I've been and all the things I've seen, all the people I've talked to, I carry with me. They're a part of what I do right here, holding the powerful accountable, keeping them honest.
AC 360, Tuesday through Saturday only on CNN. This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
You can help the refugees from Ukraine. Join the over 80,000 who've already raised millions for food, shelter, and more. Explore cnn.com/impact. Click to take action.
Osgold in Jerusalem, and this is CNN.
Topping our money lead, it's report card week for the U.S. economy. Biden's White House is rushing to get ahead of major reports that may show that the U.S. is already in a recession. You can probably understand why they're doing that. It's a big election year, and Democrats, of course, want good economic news to campaign on. As CNN's Caitlin Collins reports, President Biden is trying to rewrite the traditional and widely accepted definition of a recession.
On the economy, it's a moment of truth for the Biden White House.
I think the state of the economy is demonstrating resilience in the face of very significant global economic challenges.
This week, the White House will be watching closely for clues of a recession when new consumer confidence numbers are released Tuesday, followed by an expected interest rate hike by the Federal Reserve on Wednesday, and second quarter economic growth rates out on Thursday. With forecasters predicting the second quarter GDP will be negative, the White House arguing it doesn't mean there's a recession.
Never in the history of our country have we had a recession where the economy was creating jobs, period, let alone creating 400,000 jobs. So those numbers are inherently backward looking.
While 2 negative quarters in a row is often viewed as a sign of a recession, the president's aides are highlighting job growth and making clear it's not their definition.
Certainly in terms of the technical definition, it's not a recession.
Even if that number is negative, we are not in a recession now.
Many Americans feel differently. A new CNN poll says 64% of Americans already believe the economy is in a recession. That number even higher than October 2007, when 46% of Americans said the economy was already in a recession. The Great Recession wasn't officially declared one by the National Bureau of Economic Research until December 2008, a full 12 months after it actually began. Asked if the White House is attempting to change the common definition of a recession,
we've always talked about the strength of our economy. We've always talked about how historic it's been, and we've always talked about the transitioning, right? The transitioning to more stable and steady growth.
Now, Casey, the president himself was just asked what he thinks the likelihood of a recession is. Here's what he said, and he used the words, 3 very important words, quote, "in my view."
We're not going to be in a recession. My hope is we go from this rapid growth to steady growth. And so we'll see some coming down. But I don't think we're going to, God willing, I don't think we're going to see a recession.
Now, his aides, when they have talked about that, they have cited strong hiring, the jobless rate as well, in addition to other factors they say they're looking at when it comes to the predictions of a recession. For the president's part, you notice there he was speaking virtually earlier today. That's because, of course, he is still isolating after testing positive for COVID-19, but he told reporters that he is feeling well. He said he finally got 2 full nights of sleep last night. He said he was woken up by his dog this morning. He does say that he plans to be back at work by the end of the week, Casey, but of course, that does depend on whether or not he is going to get that negative COVID-19 test.
All right, Caitlin Collins at the White House. Thanks very much for that report. Let's discuss with our panel. Chris Cillizza, inflation affects every American directly. The Biden administration is trying to point out the definition of a recession is nuanced. But I got to tell you, I struggle with this. I get why they want to do it from a political perspective, but like you can't fake this.
No, I was laughing to myself with the "in my view" thing that Caitlin highlighted, because it's like, well, in my view, I should be drafted into the NBA. Like the NBA executives didn't agree with that.
Right.
Like it doesn't really matter what you think. There is a technical definition, 2 straight quarters of negative economic growth. They clearly believe that is likely to come to pass later this week. They're trying to pre-bud it. To your point, we get why they're doing it politically.
Right.
At the same time, we have these terms for reasons. You don't have to like it. Of course they don't like it, because the economy, Joe
Basically a textbook.
Joe Biden's handling of the economy was at 25 or 30% in our most recent poll. Like, yeah, it's a problem for them. This adds to the problem. But you don't get to change the nomenclature in the middle of a campaign because it doesn't work for you.
Well, and again, your voters are going to feel what they feel in their lives, no matter what you say.
Exactly.
All right, so Scott Jennings, I want to come to you on this, because obviously Republicans would love to talk about inflation all day long, right? You'd be walking into the midterm elections on that issue, you'd walk out the winners. But the reality is cultural issues have come into play here because of the Supreme Court decision on Roe versus Wade and some of the post-Roe protections around particularly same-sex marriage because of what Clarence Thomas put in that opinion, raising questions about whether that decision would hold. Republican Senator Marco Rubio has been out sparring with the Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg about the same-sex marriage bill. Here is what he tweeted today.
We have a Harvard-educated Transportation Secretary, Pete Buttigieg, who apparently never learned that there's a difference between the state level and the federal level. The Disney fight was a state fight. I'm going to focus on the real problems. I'm not going to focus on the agenda that dictated by a bunch of affluent elite liberals and a bunch of Marxist misfits who sadly today control the agenda of the modern Democratic Party.
So Rubio has called the need for this bill a, quote, fake problem and a stupid waste of time. It's a pretty tough way to put it for a lot of families, frankly, who, he's talking about their families. Why is he doing this?
Well, I think when you're in a re-election campaign and you're a Republican right now, there is a school of thought that no matter what your policy view is, you want to show your voters that you're fighting. I'm going to fight whatever on the issue du jour is that happens to be on the gay marriage issue today. So he's showing the Republicans down there, hey, I'm fighting Pete Buttigieg. And so wherever you come down on it. Now, not every Senate Republican has made that decision. Obviously, Ron Johnson, who's also on the ballot in Wisconsin, has said he's going to vote for it. And I think the conference is going to wind up split on this. I do think Alito and Kavanaugh couldn't have been more clear. And Rubio has a point. This is not a real issue. It's not really in danger of changing. And so I do think he has a point, but I think the political tactics here are, I got to show the people that support me that I'm a fighter, and that's what he's doing.
Yeah, I mean, do Republicans really want to be fighting on this turf, though, ahead of the midterms? They really want to be voting against a bill that legalizes a very popular issue. I mean, gay marriage is very popular in this country. It also legalizes interracial marriage.
Yeah, some do, some don't. And I think some of it's going to be jurisdiction. Like if you represent a very rural state, you've got a lot of church-going voters in your state, you might have a different view. I think Steve Daines today came out on his position. I think he represents a very rural state, of course. Again, it's going to be a split issue, and there's a legitimate political view that you just sort of brought up, which is, let's just vote for it, go with the popular opinion, and get it out of the way so we can get back to talking about the things that we know matter to voters and work in our favor, which has to be economy, inflation.
Yeah, but I mean, the fact is that a majority of Americans support abortion rights, a majority of Americans support marriage equality, a majority of Americans support interracial marriage. And so Republicans who are on the other side of that are really actually not on the side of the majority. And so I think that that's going to prove out come election time.
Well, speaking of abortion, Francesca, the Vice President, Kamala Harris, was in Indiana today. She was talking there's a special session there to talk about abortion laws. I mean, do you think this is something that's going to animate? I mean, one of the major issues Democrats have had, right, is enthusiasm, especially among their base. It's a pretty. Do you think that this is something that can make a difference in terms of getting their voters to the polls?
Well, certainly Democrats are hopeful that will drive up turnout because this is going to be a turnout election. It has everything to do with, how many in the Democratic Party. And to bring it back to inflation, though, with these kitchen table issues that we're talking about, in that same CNN poll that we were discussing before, the president had a 38% approval rating. When you ask voters what they care most about in the economy, even among Democrats, he was at 6 in 10 who thought that the economy, that he was underwater. When it comes to inflation, almost underwater. Not just with Americans broadly, but almost with Democrats also.
I mean, it seems to me, Scott is more versed in this, disagree, but it seems to me that every day that Republicans are talking about anything other than the economy, inflation, gas prices, the price of, you go to the grocery store, it costs more. Every day between now, a little over 3 months away. I didn't do my calculation before I came on.
I know. You and I should both know exactly how many days there are until the midterm election.
I don't. But a little over 3 months, every day that is not spent talking about Joe Biden's economy, Joe Biden's potential recession, inflation. It seems to me that that's a lost day strategically.
Scott Jennings, lost day?
You're absolutely true, but it's not Republicans who are putting these things on the floor. It's Democrats, and so they know what you know,
but they know what they're doing.
And they know what you just said. That if they're talking about the economy, it's a lost day.
But that would be to your point, though, Scott, which you made, which is maybe it is better that rather than all these Republican senators hemming and hawing or coming out very publicly announcing, you just hold there's a vote, they vote, and they move on, because it's one of those, sometimes you have to take these, it's not a loss, but a strategic loss in order for this broader win to talk about it later.
Well, we are going to have potentially a several-week period here of trying to, Raju, our own Manu Raju tracking down folks in the halls, getting quotes like the one from, from Marco Rubio. Not great for Republicans. Fair point. I want to switch gears slightly because, Congresswoman, in your home state of Maryland, you recently held primary elections, and the Trump-backed candidate, Dan Cox, won the party's nomination for governor. The outgoing Republican governor, who's term limited, Larry Hogan, reacted to this yesterday with Jake on State of the Union. Let's watch.
Well, I don't think there's any chance that he can win, but there's no question this was a big win for the Democratic Governors Association that I think spent over $3 million trying to promote this guy. And it was basically collusion between Trump and the National Democrats who propped this guy up and got him elected. But he really is not a serious candidate.
So in Maryland, it's clear this guy has he doesn't have a terribly good chance of getting actually elected. But there are places across the country where Democrats have spent money on MAGA candidates. Pennsylvania comes to mind, that could very well end up in positions of power in critical election years like 2024. Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania really comes to mind. I mean, I understand why Democrats are doing it from a political perspective. They think it's more likely a Democrat will get elected, but is it good for the country?
Well, the thing is, Republicans have done similarly in other races. I think this year we're focused more on what Democrats are spending in these races.
I think it's partly because Democrats are otherwise running on a platform that says democracy is paramount and extremely important. And it seems like the stakes are higher than maybe they've been in the past.
Well, I think Americans are caring about democracy now. And so when you can put that on the table and there's a clear contrast, I think that's what we're looking for in the electorate, really is a clear contrast in these candidates, whether it's in the House districts or in these Senate races, where you have that contrast in the public. Republicans, Democrats, and independents can look at the candidates and say, you know what? We really don't want to go down that route.
Well, we'll see if that happens, or if it's a kind of be careful what you wish for type scenario. I guess we're about to find out. Thank you all very much for being here today. We really appreciate it. Cell phone towers in Middle America and plans for a fancy garden at one of the highest points in Washington, D.C. Up next, a CNN exclusive. The red flags U.S. officials believe were attempts by China to spy on critical U.S. infrastructure.
Going green in association with Kirloskar, Limitless.
Football is a universal game, and the climate change is a universal problem. So I believe that sports and football in specific has the power to inspire, to change, to connect the young people to create a greener environment. Under Trees for Goals, I've been able to plant up to over 4,500 trees. And this is in the forests, this is in the schools, planted a few even at the football clubs. It's definitely an amazing feeling, to come back to the forests or the places where I planted the trees and to see that they're actually growing and they're doing well. Also what I look forward to is, to hug the trees once they grow.
Capital A Malaysian conglomerate best known for its low-cost airline, AirAsia, is going big on a new tech venture, a super app. The platform lets you reserve flights and hotels, as well as book rideshare and deliver food.
The idea for a super app is to become the center of the ecosystem. 80% of business revenue is still generated out of travel, and that gives us a very powerful positioning of our app today.
Growth plans for AirAsia's super app include Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, and Singapore. But the company has entered a market filled with steep competition. Southeast Asia is home to big-name super apps like Singapore-based Grab and Indonesia's GoTo Group.
I think one of the biggest point of difference of AirAsia Super App versus many other competitors out there is we own the infrastructure.
there is nowhere in Lysychansk that's safe.
Let me show you what this scene looks like. It's absolutely obliterated.
The force of that blast blowing out windows.
President Putin has been sending this message. He can hit this country anywhere, anytime.
Farmers are still working, even with the threat of Russian artillery that could land here.
Ukraine's message, please send more weapons.
Tech for space.
There's a space environmentalist living inside of everybody.
Tech for clean air.
Because what we're talking about here is a global problem.
Tech for quiet.
We are using some AI technologies to mitigate intruding noise.
This is Tech for Good.
Join me as I meet the minds behind the technologies that could help in the battle against invisible pollution.
Tech for Good, Saturday on CNN, in association with Samsung.
We are back with our tech lead and a CNN exclusive. The FBI is increasingly alarmed about a Chinese company's ability to intercept sensitive military information here in the United States, including nuclear arsenal communications. CNN's Katie Bo Lillis broke this story. Katie Bo, one former FBI official says that the concern level over the Chinese-made equipment on top of U.S. cell towers is in the BFD category. We'll let our viewers translate what that means. Lay it out for us. This is an incredible story.
Yeah, so this all started with this big FBI counterintelligence investigation that dates back to at least the Obama administration. It was ultimately briefed up to the Trump White House in 2019. The FBI knew that these small rural telecommunications carriers in the Midwest were using Chinese-made Huawei equipment on top of their towers in places like Colorado and Nebraska, where there's a lot of sensitive U.S. military installations, including nuclear missile silos. Now, companies say they were using this equipment because it's cheap, it's reliable, it's effective, right? It made good business sense for them. But the FBI, in the course of their investigation, was able to determine that the equipment had the capability to recognize, intercept, and potentially disrupt restricted Defense Department communications, which, as one of our sources described it, was a BFD. It offers China this potentially pivotal and really dangerous window into command and control for the U.S. nuclear arsenal, which is obviously a huge deal. Now, we should note, China obviously denies that it's using this equipment in that way, and Huawei, of course, denies that its equipment even could be used to do this.
So if the government's known about this for years, they've known about this problem, why is the equipment still there?
The short answer is money. The FCC in 2019, after this investigation was briefed up to the White House, issued a rule that ordered these companies to rip out this equipment and start all over again. The program was called Rip and Replace. Congress appropriates about $2 billion to reimburse these companies to get rid of this equipment and start all over again. The problem is that the FCC is now saying that that's about $3 billion too short. So here we are, 3 years after the FBI has briefed this investigation, 3 years after the FCC passes its rule, that equipment still there, still in use.
Wow, remarkable. So did the investigators find anything else that worried them out in Colorado and Nebraska?
They also discovered that the leading regional provider had mounted traffic and weather cameras on its towers that it was live streaming as a public service. Great if you want to see if you're going to run into traffic on your way to work. Not so great if it offers China the ability to track military movements through the region.
Wow. Okay. Katie Bo Lillis, thank you very much for this reporting. It's a bit scary. Yeah. I really appreciate it. All right, the Pope traveled all the way to Canada to make an apology on behalf of the Catholic Church. Why some believe that nothing he says will ever be enough.
I'm Eleni Jokos in Dubai, and this is CNN.
We share this place, we all belong.
Business never sleeps. As the sun sets in Seoul and Shanghai, deals are signed in Dubai, and Europe is already in play. New York prepares to make its first move. I'm Julia Chatterley, journalist, global market analyst, and host of CNN's First Move. Join me in the financial capital of the world for market-moving perspective on the news influencing global politics, culture, and finance. I'll speak to newsmakers, risk takers, and the ultimate game changers.
Bold moves, big deals, winning trades. It's all right here. Make CNN your first move.
First Move with Julia Chatterley. Weekdays on CNN.
I would describe One World as compelling, inclusive, and original. I want this show to be a place where everyone watching has a stake in the global conversation.
One World with Zain Asher, weeknights on CNN.
Turning now to our world lead. Russia says its strike on the key port of Odessa in southern Ukraine did not break the agreement it had reached to restart critical grain exports. Those shipments could stave off a global food shortage. Saturday's attack came less than 24 hours after the Kremlin signed the deal with the UN and Turkey. CNN's Nick Robertson is in Ukraine. Nick, what does this attack mean for the grain exports that the world so desperately needs?
Yeah, it means that there's a big question mark over Russia's commitment, because initially Russia said that they didn't do it, and then they said that they did do it, and then they said they were striking military targets. And now Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, has said they have the right to continue to strike Odessa port to go after military targets. And I don't think this was really what was in the UN Secretary General's understanding when he brokered this deal, although technically there is no specific ceasefire agreement in the deal. I've spoken to Ukraine's infrastructure minister today. He was the Ukrainian minister who was in Istanbul Friday to sign that deal. And he said, look, we're committed. We want to get it done. We hope to be able to get grain moving by the end of the week. That's their hope. Obviously, they've got to get some mines out of the way, some sunken ships out of the way. But another thing is unnerving and worrying the Ukrainian officials at the moment, and that is that the Russians are saying that their ships can escort the cargo vessels. The Ukrainians are saying, that's not going to happen.
So the State Department also has confirmed the deaths of 2 Americans in Ukraine. What are you learning about that?
Yeah, we're learning details about one of them, Luzishin. He was in the Donbass area, which is one of the more heavily shelled and contested front lines in Ukraine at the moment. His mother says that an artillery shell hit the position that he was on, that 3 other men with him tried to save him, obviously unsuccessful. She said that he had told her that they were short of protective equipment. This is what she said.
The last conversation was, oh my goodness, he kept saying, Mom, we need equipment. We really need equipment. We need helmets. We need tactical vests. We need scopes. Can you send me some? All he talked about was, Mom, I really want to help. And that's what he did.
So that's a huge front line where he was killed. A lot of artillery, a lot of big missiles coming in there every day, every night. Those soldiers on the front lines really getting it hard.
All right, Nick Robertson in Kyiv. Thank you very much. In our faith lead, a papal trip like no other. Today, Pope Francis apologized to Canada's Indigenous communities for the Catholic Church's role in residential schools, where children suffered decades of physical, sexual, and mental abuse. Before his remarks at a powwow in Alberta, the Pope met with Indigenous peoples in a cemetery at a former school. CNN's Paula Newton takes a closer look at the sins the Pope is trying to atone for.
It has taken the high-tech tools of this century for Canadian soil to give up the torturous secrets of the last. Drones hovering, swooping, mapping, ground-penetrating radar peering into every layer.
We see if there's any disturbances in that soil structure.
Disturbances. These are soil anomalies that could lead to the unmarked graves of Indigenous children, those who were once students at Fort Alexander Residential School in the Sagkeeng First Nation in the province of Manitoba.
When you have 190 anomalies, there's got to be something.
Go this way.
The Catholic institution is no longer standing, but its survivors want you to know what it stood for. Abuse of all kinds that a government report found amounted to cultural genocide.
That's where the priest stayed.
Rita Gumond was just 6 when she arrived. The abuse started soon after.
And he'd have us sit on his lap, and meanwhile he had his hands under our skirts.
Patrick Bruyere was 7. He endured 8 years.
Then he got me drunk. I didn't know what the hell happened when I got up that next morning.
Sarah Mazzaroli was 6, forced to stay until she was 14.
Bam! Across the face. Every morning she did that to me.
Henry Boubard is 80 now, just 7 when the nightmare started.
But after what the priest did to me, sexually, I changed everything.
You have to survive if you're going to live. You have to find ways to get over everything that was being done to you.
Well, it was all prayer, it was all behave yourself, it was all don't speak your language, because if you do, you'll get punished, and a lot of humiliation.
This just told me to pray, but pray, what is prayer? It means nothing to me. If you don't pray, they go to hell. I thought that was all these years I was living in hell in that residential school. This is hell to me.
Hundreds of victims like these from one school. And there were dozens of these institutions across Canada, most run by the Catholic Church. More than 150,000 Indigenous children were forced to leave their families and were subjected to forced labor, neglect, and sexual and physical abuse. And thousands just went missing. In the past year, several Indigenous communities have discovered hundreds of unmarked graves, and more searches are underway. The survivors of Fort Alexander were too young to know where children went and why. There remain unmarked crosses in the cemetery made from the old school pipes. Who lays there? So here too, during the very week Pope Francis is on Canadian soil to apologize, they scour the land.
What's so extraordinary here, Casey, is that, think about it, the Pope actually begged for forgiveness in this powwow, and yet the whole scope of the abuse here, you just heard those survivors speak of it, it just stands in contrast to this one gesture. This is what we call intergenerational trauma. It is not just about isolated cases of abuse, and it continues to stay with Indigenous communities and the people throughout this country, literally from coast to coast to coast. It is a profound apology, but there is a lot of healing that still needs to be done.
Absolutely heartbreaking. Paula Newton in Edmonton, thank you very much. A completely different experience for a pastor in New York. Up next, the robbery during Sunday service, captured on the church's live stream.
The data shows that the Caribbean and Latin America have some of the highest rates of sex crimes in the world, and sex crimes ties into human trafficking. My name is Jonathan Bagan. I'm based in Trinidad and Tobago. I'm an attorney at law and also chairman of the Caribbean Committee Against Sex Crimes. Say 10 years ago, it was said, even in my country, that nobody should speak out about human trafficking because they will come to get you, the mafia. Now that hundreds of people know about it and are speaking out against it, that darkness has been destroyed, and now we're bringing the issue into the light. Schools across Grenada, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Trinidad and Tobago, the students were really positive about it. They wrote poems, spoken word poems, they made videos.
I've risen and believed.
And those videos went on to the local media, onto the radio and television.
On arrival, you are forced into captivity and a life of servitude.
So the students were inspired to see their fellow students being connected to CNN International. A lot of kids now know the signs of human trafficking, what it is and how to avoid it. So we may have saved some lives. My Freedom Day helped raise awareness, educate children, and I hope it inspires politicians and the governments across the region to do more to stop this crime from happening. It's impactful and important, and we hope to do even better next year.
I'm Jim Bitterman in Paris, and this is CNN.